It's 2:37 and we'll begin the meeting. Hopefully Matt will join us. I'm going to start with roll call. First of all, Dave, do you have any opening comments from the department?
I think the department continues to work with Petroleum Tank Fund, and hopefully it's meeting the needs of the customers, but it's an evolving process, the rules, and still the online registration is working well, but there's still a learning process for some. I think we're moving in the right direction, but still some more direction to go, and now looking at above ground storage tank rules, which will be interesting.
Yeah,
and critical.
We have updates on both of those on the agenda.
All good. That's all I got to say. Appreciate all your efforts and participation, because the board kind of what makes this go. So appreciate it.
Just to reiterate, this is a special public board meeting.
It's gotta be mailed.
It's got to be mapped. Hang on, let's see, people. Sorry, Matt. I finally found out how to let you in. We heard you knocking on the door. Can you hear?
Hi, Dwayne.
Sorry, I think you've been trying to get in for about 10 minutes, right?
No, just did.
Oh, okay, well, good deal.
Sorry I'm late.
That's all right. We started at 2:37, and I'm going to take the time right now to introduce our newest board member, who unfortunately couldn't attend today because of another commitment. Brady Pelton from the Petroleum Council was accepted by and appointed by the governor on June 15th to fulfill the spot that Kerry Cuttings held. And he'll be joining us not in this meeting, but he said he would listen to the recording of the meeting when we get it posted on the website, so he'll be up to date. So he and I have had some conversations. I think he's got a pretty good understanding of what the petroleum tank program is about, and he's been affiliated, I think, how long has he been with the council? Do you know, Dave?
It's been a few years. I don't know.
Yeah,
exactly.
he's their general counsel, right? So he's an attorney by trade, I think.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
Don't know for a fact.
So anyway, glad we got that taken care of. It took a little longer than anticipated because he'd actually submitted his application early this year. And in the meantime, the governor's office had a change on who was running the boards, and his application got lost. And so he and I spoke upon Tony's recommendation. Tony recommended that we probably follow up with it. And he got a hold of the governor's office, and the governor's office found his application and accepted it. So we are a full board now. So thanks to Brady. I'm going to conduct roll call. So we'll start with, we'll just go alphabetical, and we'll go with Tony Bernhardt.
Here.
Matt Bjornson.
Here.
Can't hear you, Matt.
Here.
Thank you. We have Paul Much is joining us by phone.
Here.
And Brady Pelton is absent. And Brendan Turnbull has joined us by.
Yes, I'm here.
Very good.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi. Okay, if you want to, did everybody get a packet from me? Were you able to get it by mail? Okay, let's go to page 2. Jim Nicolai helped the fund develop a guidance document for some guidance on how we conduct public meetings. And he has one change that he wants to make, and I'll turn the platform over to him when we get to that point. But did everybody get a chance to read through that and comments or concerns? Jim, you want to just give us a little background on on what you,
Sure.
there's one we talked about this morning.
Sure. Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah.
Yep. Sounds-
If you turn to the very last paragraph, in the second line, between the words pending litigation and should never be discussed, we need to insert a caret there that adds this phrase. It would read this way now. Matters relating to pending litigation that are considered attorney consultation under North Dakota Century Code 4409-19.1 sub 5 should never be discussed during a meeting. And like my understanding is make that red, make that, and then provide everyone a copy of that. And I can give a little bit of an example. So the Century Code provisions that govern the advisory board do require the advisory board to discuss all claims against the fund. So that general kind of discussion of the pending claims against the fund should be part of a public meeting. But if there's questions about things like the strengths and weaknesses of a particular case in pending litigation, that's something that you should, if you have questions about, that's something that you should schedule a special meeting with an executive session so that you can talk to me or an attorney that represents you, that represents the tank fund. I'll just read 4404-19.1 sub 5 for you so that you kind of get an understanding of what is covered by that. And then I'll give you an example of what you could discuss in a public meeting with reference to, for example, the Flying J case that's pending, and then what you would not want to discuss in a public meeting. And if you had questions about, would want to schedule an executive session to me or some other attorney. So the statute says attorney consultation means any discussion between a governing body and its attorney in instances in which the governing body seeks or receives the attorney's advice regarding and in anticipation of reasonably predictable or pending civil or criminal litigation or adversarial administrative proceedings, or to receive its attorney's advice and guidance on the legal risks, strengths, and weaknesses of an action of a public entity, which, if held in public, would have an adverse fiscal effect on the entity. All other discussions beyond the attorney's advice and guidance must be made in the open unless otherwise provided by law. So let's use the Flying J case as an example. The type of thing that could be discussed and needs to be discussed in an open meetings, if you're talking about that pending claim, would be something along these lines. And I can just provide an update on the Flying J case for everybody in the course of providing this example. So as you all know, there was a mediation that was scheduled since your last meeting. That mediation was not successful. The parties did not settle the case. Since that time, the plaintiff's attorney has made a motion to amend his complaint, or Flying J's complaint. That was granted, and the purpose of that was to give more clarification to the specific types of claims and the damages that are available to Flying J in this case. And the trial date has been set off till December 5, 2023, or no, 2022. So those are the kind of things that you should discuss. But if it comes to things that, as far as relative strengths or weaknesses of the case, getting into the merits, that's the kind of thing that you'd want to hold an executive session for. For example, at the last meeting, there were some things discussed that related to that, and the things that said weren't necessarily accurate in a number of measures. One with respect to what attorneys represented what parties, what some of the material issues were, what the strengths or weaknesses of the board's subrogation interest are. In that respect, it's important to remember that there may be differences between the strengths or weaknesses of the board's subrogation interest and the strengths or weaknesses of the underlying litigation. So those are all things that are important not to have discussed in an open meeting, because it could have a potential adverse impact on both the state's interest and the party's interest in the case. So if anybody has any questions about that, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
So Jim, would we be able to have an executive session then after the public meeting, the same day? So if anything like that, we would be able to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's just that be noticed on the, that you're gonna have an executive session. Yep,
So if we're gonna have an executive session, we would have to include it in the meeting agenda
Okay.
that's posted publicly.
so for example, today, we wouldn't be able to have an executive session because it wasn't part of the agenda.
It's
But
very similar to what we did last, October, August, when we called that executive session to talk about the claim embargo.
the claim in Fargo, right?
Right.
And if you remember from that meeting, I think we started talking about some things during the executive session, and I said, now it's important for you these are things that need to be put on the record publicly,
Public meeting.
because and I will certainly be able to advise you that
Sure, right.
whenever we have an executive session about things that need to be put on the public record that may come up during an executive session.
If we feel, or if, like for an executive session, I'm just trying to save time for all the members, board members to get involved, to have our public meeting, would it be okay to schedule an executive session, whether we had one or not?
Yep, yeah, you can always,
Because we wouldn't necessarily need to have one, but at least it would be on the agenda if we needed to.
oh, I
Would
see
that-
what
would
you
that
mean.
be, would that be fair?
What if we wouldn't need a topic though?
Would you need a topic?
Yeah, I guess I'd have to look into that more, Tony. I'm not sure about that.
Seems to me like you have to have a topic for the
Okay,
executive
and that
session,
would make sense too.
Yeah.
so just to keep everything going. Okay, thanks, Jim.
Any other questions?
I want to move on to the review and approval of the last board meeting minutes. So we met on December 2nd of 2021. I sent the minutes out to everyone yesterday. Is there any additions or corrections? First of all, did everybody have a chance to get the chance to read it, or do you want me to read through the? Okay. So in not hearing no additional comments or changes, could we have someone make a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I'll make that motion to accept the minutes as presented. Tony Bernhardt.
Do I have a second? Somebody's gonna have to unmute their phone or their.
Matt,
Okay. So we have a second by Matt. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign? Okay, we'll enter the meeting minutes into the record as approved as written. Okay. I just wanted to touch base a little bit about those people, in this case, it affects Tony. And Brandon, you went through the process, but in order for us to reimburse you for that $65.50 you get and the mileage, you have to become a part-time staffer of the DEQ. So if
When
you're,
do you
in-
want me to start? No,
if you're interested in that, I can get Beth to provide us
I'm
with the
good.
paperwork.
I'm good.
So that's for anybody. She wanted me to make sure to mention that because that's kind of changed since we took over the program. Office of Management and Budget wants you guys to be part-time members, staff members. Okay, moving on to the third item, the petroleum release, tank fund administrative rules that are proposed. We're moving those rules forward. We're finalizing and we're going to distribute the rules packet to the North Dakota Attorney General's office for review, and that'll happen July 5th, unless I can get it done tomorrow. And we'll get those off to the Attorney General so they can review and give us confirmation that everything's, going to go ahead and go forward. In September, then we'll present the rule, we'll get on the agenda and we'll present the rules to the North Dakota Legislative Council's Administrative Rule Committee. And they will give us either yay or nay about accepting those rules. We're anticipating that the rules are going to be approved. And then the petroleum tank program has a lot of work to do. We're going to implement with our IT staff the ability for the electronic portal to support a self-owner certification process. They'll be able to go into the site and rate their tanks with respect to the appropriate risk hazard category. And there'll be a certification signature that they have to do, say information they're providing us is correct and complete. And at some point in the near future, then we'll probably do some random inspections, site inspections, to go out and make sure that what a certain number of have submitted are in fact correct. We're also going to have a written process because we know that some of our tank owners are very adverse to the electronic use of our portal. Not many, but a few. And we'll make that available by email or U.S. Postal Service mail capabilities. The real advantage to the portal is the fact that we can reduce our administrative costs quite significantly because we reduce double data entry into our database. So I've got a copy of the agency's estimated cost to implement the rules, and I think I included that with the packet. We'll go to that as soon as I'm done with this page.
Dwayne, just a question.
Yes.
Tony Bernhardt here again. So if the rules do get accepted in October through November of 22, rules are approved and we go electronically, I wouldn't be offended to be used as, or any petroleum marketer to insert the information and make sure the portal works possibly.
That'd be great. Yeah, what we'll probably do is we'll probably use our test database first.
Correct.
We have a test database and we have that database. So we do beta testing on our test database. So that's probably what we'll do. And then we'll make sure that it works in the test database before we actually, transfer that information to the database. Yeah, we'll definitely keep that in
I
mind.
think that'd be a good idea, just to make
Yeah.
sure there's no bugs when you register
I just-
online, because there always is.
Yeah, I just want to really thank Gary. Gary is our resident IT individual at the department, and he has been significant in being able to make everything happen related to the portal. I don't have any of that knowledge, and he's just magnificent at what he can do.
So
What?
Dwayne, Matt here, I got a question. On these rules, are they looking from comments from the tank fund?
The rules have been, there was only one comment that was received, the public comment, and we have responded to that comment. That goes into our packet that goes to the Attorney General's office. And we thank the commenter for the comments that they presented, but we didn't change anything in the rules. The rules are written are being presented as you guys voted on the December meeting. So they're Nothing has changed. Does that answer your question, Matt?
Well, at our December meeting, we didn't vote that we agreed with everything in the rules, did we?
Yeah, I thought we did. I thought there was a motion and look at the minutes.
Because there's a number of things in this proposed rule that need some brush up.
Well, second motion made by you. Then we voted on it. And those have been accepted. So if we were to revise those, it's a possibility. Have to go out for public comment again, and that is going to delay us by probably a year to get this thing all implemented. So my recommendation as the fund program manager is that we go ahead and present these rules to the administrative rules committee, and we can always go back in and tweak those rules, you know, at some point in time if you want to tweak I'm sure you're talking about probably the risk categories and the multipliers in that section. I think it's section 3. But if we significantly change the rules, we decide to do that, we're going to have to go back out for comment.
What are Matt's comments?
What are your comments, Matt, specifically?
Well, on page 4 of the rule, so that's performance standards for above ground storage tank systems, item number 1. And A under item number 1. The only choice they give there for a secondary containment is a dike with.
Are you talking about the above ground storage tank rules? We're not talking about those. No, we're talking right now. We're discussing the petroleum tank rules.
Oh, okay. My mistake. I'm sorry. I didn't understand that.
It's the above ground storage tank rules are actually item number 7 on the agenda. So we'll get there. And those have not went out for public.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, those.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's okay. So just continuing on, I want to let you know that with Gary's help, we have contracted with the original database vendor to write changes that we're going to implement once we have the rules accepted. And, you know, we have a non-binding contract, which means that if we've signed a contract for $30,000, but if we spend less than that, we don't have to expend the $30,000. And then we'll have that registration portal open for the new fee structure August 1st of 2023 per the rules, because we extended that sign-up period till August 1st now. Your dues are the 1st of August. So it gives you from July to August. You're covered under the current structure. And then what we'll do, because we haven't got the new rules in place, the certification of registration you're going to get is going to have the ending date of the 30th of June, 2023. But as soon as we get the rules adopted, we'll send out an amended certification of registration to say that your rule or your tank fees have been extended through July 31st of 2023. So then there's no, there's no lapse of coverage, right? Correct. Because our rules will specify that. But I can't do it now because we haven't adopted the new rules. Okay, so I sent you that fiscal note. We have to include this in our packet to the Attorney General's office. So it kind of gives you an idea of what we're going to spend. We've estimated our costs, and some of these costs are, internal administrative costs that include, time that I spend every day working in the office. But we needed to come up with what we thought it would cost the department to implement the rules. So we're at about $45,350 And then we anticipate about another $9,000 to maintain.
And this would be extracted out of the fund?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, it's in our budget. Okay, so then they also wanted us to come up with an estimation of what fee structure would bring us in revenue. Last year, I should say 2021 year end figure, which this was done before we had figures for 2022, but we took in about $636,000. But we're anticipating to bring in right around $1.5 million. And that's, what we did is I took a look at analysis and took a look at what tanks we have and what we're anticipating the annual registration fees are going to be for the classification. So we had 3,500 tanks estimated at $150, 1,000 tanks at $225, and 1,000 tanks at $300 to come up with that $1,500. So that boosts our revenue almost $400,000 a year.
Dwayne, just for clarifications, it's $1,050,000 is projected revenue.
That's what we're projecting.
Okay.
That's what we send to the Attorney General's office. It's part of the packet. They want you to do
You had said $1.5 million.
like $1 million.
For clarification, there's
Exactly.
So let me be corrected. $1,050,000 instead of what I had said. Okay, I just included a copy of the next item on the agenda is basically a review of the tank registration form. So this was the new tank registration form. We added some information into that. We talked about, fuel contents and the fact that the tank must be compatible with the tank infrastructure. And so we referenced E15 or fuels with greater concentrations of ethanol. That was an addition, as was the infrastructure and all the fuel-related components, including hoses, gaskets, pipe, dope, et cetera. And a lot of that information was forwarded to me by Mike Rood from the Petroleum Marketers Association. So thank Mike for that. That was really good input. And then, we include in here, it says, make fee payments as soon as practical on or after July 1st, 2022. I'm going to make sure that that's bold and in red next year, because I think there's a lot of confusion. And next year, it may be different because they're going to have that window of opportunity. They're going to have that month. So nobody's going to be really worried about, am I going to be late paying my tank fee dues? Because the way it's been structured for years is your tank fees are due on the 1st and you can't make payment till the 1st because the bill's going to go out. And that's just the way the Office of Management Budget works with our fiscal year system. And the rest is just basic information. It's been pretty much the same year after year. We haven't made any changes to describing the fund and how it financially assists tank owners in operating the costs they incur when they clean up, as long as they meet the rules. So what did we take in this year? Last year we took in $636,000. To date, we've taken in $634,050. So, it's pretty consistent year to year. I mean, I think we're off by about $2,000. So how is it broken down? We had revenue from registrations of $596,900. That's just from regular registrations. We had late fees. Late fees are those tank owners that pay after September 1st or assessed tank fees at $5 per month. And so we collect $46.50. And then revenue from past due fees, that's where we get a tank owner who wants to become registered in the fund. They're required to submit to the department a phase 2 study, the tank integrity tests, and go through all the hoops, making sure that they've got the right documentation, including if they're above ground storage tanks, their SPCC plan. We look at all of that, and if we think that the site is compliant and it deserves to be placed in the fund. So that's where that revenue comes in. We had 3 Microsoft sites. We had a couple of other industrial sites where they provided us with that funding, with all of that information. So we accepted those into the fund. And our claim expenses reimbursement for the year up to yesterday was $505,478.18. I don't expect to see anything probably be paid out in this fiscal year. We've got a couple of outstanding invoices, but we probably won't get them paid until beginning of the year, beginning of the new fiscal year.
And the fiscal year ends when?
30th of June,
Okay, so that is, okay,
ends Friday, and ends tomorrow,
yep,
tomorrow.
state fiscal year.
And so my guess is, I think we had one claim that I passed to Dave's office yesterday, but we won't pay that out till after the first of the year. So this is pretty much secured. Okay, so how we set? That's the big question. Where are we? Where are we financially? This is from the State Investment Board. It's a statement of net position. The latest information that I have from them is dated April 30th of 2022. So if you take a look, that included that in your report. We're at about $5,971,302 or $302. That's down. We're pretty close to being down 300,000. Why is that? I will show you very shortly. We have had depreciation in the marketplace since this is year to date. As of April, we lost $292,462 in that account because of the current financial status of our investments. That's nothing we control. That's all controlled by the State Investment Board. So that is the reason that we're showing $5,971,000 instead of what we were at here, which was over 60, almost 63, 6.3 million. So it affects, our markets affect our fund. Any questions on that information? Again, that doesn't include, that's as of the 30th of April. That was the last available information that we had from the State Investment Board.
So as a board, what's our say so with that? You know, it's $300,000 and
I don't think we have any
they
say
have
at
no
all.
say in that. There's
Yeah,
nothing.
we contract with the State Investment Board.
They have routine meetings. You know, they never attended one, to be honest with you, but I would imagine they're public meetings, and if you had questions or concerns, we could participate.
Yeah,
You would think that the investments would be ultra conservative.
they are pretty conservative. Yeah, in fact, they do on the website, their website, they list what our investment portfolio actually is. So I took a look at that, and a lot of it's fixed, you know, fixed type assets. But, you know, it's only 5%. And I looked at my personal portfolio, and I wish I had only lost 5% of my personal portfolio. So I think they, you know, do a fairly decent job of being conservative. Keep in mind, we made about $600,000 in the last 2 years too. So we've lost half of that.
Could we, this is Dave, at a following meeting, just maybe have a representative from the investment board show up, just kind of give us a feel for how they do things and.
Sure. We probably wouldn't want to do that in October because they'd have to come to Fargo. But we could maybe have them do a
Well,
virtual
I
presentation.
defer to the board, you know, just
Yeah.
at some time in the future.
Once a year.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But we could call a special meeting to do that too. I mean. we
Well,
can-
I don't know if you want to do a special meeting just for that.
Well, if we did it virtually, I mean, we could.
Well, I'd leave it up to.
Okay. All right, so here's just some general descriptions of invested cash securities lending collateral. I'll let you guys read those notes. All right, so Beth spent a lot of time putting this together for us, so I really thank her for it. She got it to me after the packet went out, but she got it together for us. And basically gives us where bad after our liabilities, including $778,000 worth of reserves that we have against the fund, and I'll show you where we get that number from. But we have $5.227 million to us. So that's why we're still at tank, $100 per tank fee, because we fall underneath that $6 million cap. Next year, in the new rules, that cap goes from 6 million to 7 million. And the base fee will be $140. So I included a payment report. You can see where all of our payments went out. We had one big claimant. That's the bank up in Williston. That's at Racer's site. That's at $500,000 now that we paid out on that. And I anticipate that to go to $750,000 by the time we're done. You see a couple of them that are $25,000 claims. Those were historic claims, and their claim amounts were more than that. But because of the nature of the Century Code, we were only able to pay them $25,000 because of the way the historic nature of the claim was. They were releases that were found after the fact, and they were actually inactive sites at the time. And the fund, I think it's 23.1-12-19, I think it is, 01-19 is the provision that allows us to do that on historic claims. And we just wrapped up and closed up the Town and Country of Steele, North Dakota Cooperstown site. I think we did that for less than $100,000. Seems like the total there was about $80,000. That site is complete. So there's the $505,475 we spent this year. Any questions on that, buddy? Hearing none, I'll move.
Dwayne is Matt.
Yeah.
On the Town and Country, was there anything further looked into about subrogation against the hauler that overfilled that tank?
Well, fortunately, that tank predated our administration, and the previous administrator never had a subrogation agreement with that site. There's no signed subrogation agreement. So I don't know if we can go back after the fact, but the previous administrator didn't. That claim, I think, goes back to 2016 or 17, if I remember right. So I don't think we're going to get anything back, man. All new claims that come in have a subrogation agreement that goes along with them, signed in front of a notary public. So we should never have that incident ever happen again. And I can't talk for the previous administration, so I don't know. It's in the rules. It's in their rules. It was in their old rules. But they never did it. I think Jim was the one who caught that in the rules and said, hey, we need to have a subrogation agreement. Remember when you brought that up?
Yeah.
So Jim was very implemental in getting us to put that into place. And we're thankful for that.
So this is Paul here. So when did we start having those subrogations forms signed then?
Just about the time we took over in 2019.
Is that right? Huh.
Yep. So it's the signed document. Jim did a lot of research to find a decent document that we could use as a template, and he basically put the template together, and I tweaked it a little bit, and he approved it, and that goes out to every claimant. Anybody who submits a 17017, which is a claim for reimbursement, gets that document in the document packet. And if they don't send it back, there's nothing done on the claim until they get it back. So it's I mean, everybody signs it and gets it back, so we don't have any issue with that at all.
Carolyn should get a shout out for some background work she did on that as well.
Carolyn did? Yeah, okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's background, but I probably wasn't aware of. I want to make sure that we get everybody that's had any of their input into this. We have another administrative assistant who's really helped us with the administrative rules, and her name is, what's Rosemary's last name?
Peterson.
Yes, Peterson. And she is really good. She's very implemental in keeping the fund, keeping our administrative priorities correct. She does all of the proofreading, and anything that goes out of my office goes through her hands generally first. Claims report, this is just an overall claims report that shows, since the, we're looking at, this is where our, I'm trying to find our reserves. Our reserves, you know, this is from 2020 on. That's what we've had in reserve. But we have remaining in our reserve is that $700,000 we talked about earlier in the financial report.
Dwayne, Tony Bernhardt again. So before, and this is probably immaterial, maybe it's not, but I always like to see the UST and AST tanks on here. We had them listed on here. Now it seems like they're gone again.
Well, we just have to pull a report that way.
It'd be nice to see that, because.
I can go through these.
No, that's not necessary, but just for sake of mind.
The biggest claims generally are the above ground
Right.
claims. Like the Farmers Union Company of Hazen, that's above ground. Pleasanton was above ground. I think Wilton was above ground. York was above ground. That one we haven't gotten any bills on yet. Freeway 147 was above ground. The come and goes and the mini marts were underground. Century Ag is underground. PetroServe underground. Pilot Travel Services underground. Saar Oil Company above ground. Super Pumpers were underground. We haven't received anything at this point in time from them. And United Quality Co-op, that was underground. And this 1401 9th Avenue Northwest LLC, that's an above ground site. This is the 4201 2nd Avenue West is an above ground site. So most of our big ones are above ground. Generally, an underground storage tank that's pulled and you find contamination, you can generally clean those up for anywhere from $80,000 to $150,000, somewhere in that range. Once in a while, they approach 200,000, but not very often. Okay. Any questions? If not, I'm going to move on to our above ground storage tank presentation. Okay, this presentation was put together by Scott Raddick. And I think you all were privileged to get copies of the draft AST rules, correct? Didn't I mail that out earlier? Maybe in May? But if not, just get back to me and I'll send you a PDF copy of those rules. But we just kind of did a brief summary. So the basis for the rules under section 23.1-12 of the tank fund rules talks about the fact that reimbursement for expenses can't be paid unless the site owner is compliant with state and federal rules. So the only state rules for storage tanks currently are in the fire code, administered by the North Dakota Fire Marshal's Office, and are largely relevant to the prevention and releases to the environment. There's no federal program for ASTs comparable to the UST program, and the only federal rules for ASTs are the EPA's Spill Prevention Control and Countermeasure. And that is primarily to address releases to waters of the U.S. and waters of the state, but it doesn't cover anything regarding soil or groundwater contamination. So it doesn't address, any kind of protection underneath the tanks themselves. There is a guidance document for farm tanks that's released, that has been out for quite some time, from the Department of Emergency Services, that points out some of the things that farmers are supposed to have in place, including an SPCC plan. That's being updated this year, so they've asked the Petroleum Tank Program and I think the USD Tank Program for some input. It's the document we got from Bill Zeese this morning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bill sent it this morning.
So there's some updates that we have to make. It's got outdated contact information for the DEQ. So right now, the proposed AST rules are based on the state fire code and the underground storage tank rules. And the rules lay out the requirements under which an owner operator would be eligible for reimbursement of expenses with the correction actions taken in a release to the environment. So what's the applicability? They can only be applied to above ground storage tanks that are registered in the tank fund. Okay, so these rules would not apply if to tanks that are exempted from participation in the fund, or in the case of rural agricultural tanks, or tanks used in for their own purpose that don't register with the fund. They don't, the rules aren't meant to replace or supersede any applicable health and safety requirements. And at this time, we don't have any requirement to upgrade or replace existing AST systems. The exception, the system does not meet the fire codes. So Matt, you probably got some comments. Matt, you there?
Yep, sorry, I had it on mute.
Okay.
So, so at this point, as I understand it, I visited with Scott Radig, correct?
Reddit, yep.
Quite a bit about this couple months ago, a month and a half ago, and shared some personal opinions. I've got some notes if everybody's got a copy of the proposed language in front of them.
Can pull it from a computer, I think. Into the different.
Can I proceed, Dwayne?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just searching to see if I can pull it out. Go ahead.
On page 4, under performance standards for above ground storage tank systems, number 1, item A, it talks about what is allowed for secondary containment. And they basically are limiting it to only a synthetic liner. I guess personally, I've seen a lot of poured concrete dikes, which means the floor of the dike and the walls were all poured, that perform very well if they're constructed correctly. And I think that should be an option. There's a lot of those type of installations existing, and we all know concrete cracks, but whether it cracks to the point that it won't hold liquid is easily identified, because if the dike doesn't hold water every time it rains, then it's obviously not liquid tight and needs to be repaired. So that would be a comment that I think an option for a poured concrete floor and walls that demonstrate water retention would be appropriate. On page 6, under methods of release detection for tanks, so under 1A1, it says the interstitial space must be inspected and documented at least monthly, which to me is unclear. I mean, are they saying you should put some kind of stick in there, or there's not, and maybe keep in mind, there's not necessarily a monitoring port on a double wall or double bottom tank. I don't know how you deal with those, because with no port into the interstice. But I had shared with Scott that in lieu of a continuous fuel sensor, another recognized option should be a vacuum on that interstice, monitored by a vacuum gauge, either constant or a periodic test with vacuum. So I would propose that they allow glycerin-filled vacuum gauges that are visually checked monthly with an annual check that the gauge is actually functioning, which actually is easy to do. You just crack the valve and see if the needle will move. If the needle moves, you know that the gauge is functioning. So again, on those methods for leak detection, I think that there should be a vacuum option. And of course, I think it's a good idea because that's what we do, but that's neither here nor there.
Can you tell me
Yep.
which section that was again?
1A1, page 6.
Page 6?
Page 33.1-120207. And then underneath it's 1A1.
7-1, can't see. Wrong page? I'm still on the wrong page.
And I guess as I'm reading out these suggestions, I'm reading them out as a motion that I'd like the tank board to vote on, as far as so that we could represent that the tank fund board would like to see the following changes. Page 7, item number 2. Right now it reads, owners, operators of existing above ground storage tanks or tanks that are not secondarily contained must provide release detection, blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, I think that is not probably worded properly, because tanks that are not secondarily contained are not legal. So I assume what they meant was tanks that are not secondarily contained with the presence of either a synthetic liner or a poured concrete wall and floor for the dike.
Matt, I think the version that I have up, I thought I talked to Scott before he left, and I thought he incorporated a lot of those suggestions that you had in the newest version, so I'm not sure.
So when,
Yeah, the page number.
Could you send us that version? Because I Googled in my email, I pulled you up and I got this off of what you sent me.
Right, but I think that was before you talked to him. Because he's since updated, our numbers aren't correct either. No, well,
Well,
this is.
So we weren't sent the latest proposed rules then?
It just got them to me not very long ago, a week and a half ago.
Okay, because the updated one's on the team.
Yeah, I think this came.
Yeah.
So I can send you that new update, and then we can we can go from there. But I thought that, and I don't have Scott here, so I can't, I wasn't involved in the process, so I can't.
Your numbering is not lining up with mine, is that correct?
Right, because I've got on
Okay,
page,
well then I might as well stop reading because I don't have the current one in front of me.
yeah,
And it took me a couple hours going through this one to come up with comments. So I would say we either need to have a special meeting to go over just this, or we need to wait for our next regular meeting, whichever the department prefers.
nothing's gonna be done with these right now until Scott comes back from vacation, which will be September. Because I just don't have time to take a look at them.
Is it okay for Matt to send his comments to you, and can you
Sure.
go through it and kind of redline it?
Yeah, and I can compare it to Scott's
And
document.
then for the next meeting, you'd be all set.
Yeah. Could you do that? Just make me a PDF or something of your comments. You keep the original and just send me a copy of your comments. And I'll make sure that I match them up with the latest version Scott sent to us.
Yeah, or I can do that. But in the meantime, why don't you send me a copy of the latest version you have?
Sure, I will.
I do think it would be simpler for all parties involved if we could iron out some things before it goes totally to public comment.
Agreed. And that's the plan.
And not, and just to clarify, not all my comments are towards more leniency. I think we need to further address some items such as, there are existing dikes that are using concrete block and saying it's their dike. I think it should be explicitly said that that's not good enough. Currently under SPCC anyway, people with 100-year-old riveted Amoco tanks on piers for bulk plants are able not to have a dike because the engineer says that you can visually see a leak. I think that is a good danger to the fund as well, because while visually looking for a leak has merit, it doesn't cover the instance where a 100-year-old tank structurally fails and loses everything inside of it. Another item I saw is I don't think that this rule properly addresses above ground tanks feeding retail pumps that are actually suction. As everybody knows on the call, a suction line on a UST installation is termed safe suction. With the AST, the suction is no longer safe because the head pressure is going to push through a leak, and the pump will continue to function. Whereas in the UST, a safe suction system will not properly work if there's a breach in the line. I think we need to take a look at the requirement of telling to the nearest eighth of an inch how much water is in these tanks. All tanks have a water bottom unless they were just cleaned, and it's not practicable to determine a water bottom in a 20,000 gallon AST that's 30 feet off the ground. I guess in a nutshell, that was it. But I can review the latest version once I have it.
Sure, I'll get those, you email copies, okay, for everyone?
Yep.
Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, Paul?
Yes, email is good.
I'll get those off tomorrow so that you have them. Okay, let's see, I gotta get back.
Wayne, I would like to ask the rest of the board, do they agree with my premise that it would be worthwhile for the board to come to an agreement on changes and at least make those recommendations?
I would agree with that.
I would agree. Yeah.
Okay, and that, this is Dave, and that would be our intent, that we
Yeah.
not move forward unless the board
Right.
isn't support, that the board supports the.
Correct. And we've got some time too. So if we need to do something and if we want to approach it before Scott comes back in September, we could do a special meeting, a special virtual meeting in August. If everybody has the availability, we could pick a date. So I can get back to you on that too. Once I get through July, my life becomes easier. So I just request that it not be in July. But later in August would be great. Because I think we should do that before we meet at our October meeting. Then if we do have something that's ready to go out for public comment, then we can put our stamp of approval on it and move forward. And there's still quite a bit of administrative work that needs to be done to get it to the point where we send it out for public comment and then go to the rules committee and all that stuff. Does everybody got that presentation? Is there any reason for me to go through it, or can you review it on your own and we can save some time and talk? We've got a couple other issues that are really important for us to discuss.
Or any questions?
If you got any questions on any of the document, the presentation that was put together?
What you may want to do is just go through that at the next meeting, have the rules.
Yeah, we can go through this at the next meeting. Then Scott, we'll get Scott to make sure he's here because he put the presentation together. He's the most knowledgeable about these rules of any of us. Okay, so with that, I want to move forward because I've got the underground storage tank people here. Matt, you had some questions about their certificate of compliance program. So I'm going to let you take the lead here and let's talk about that issue.
Well, some of you may recall we had a discussion a year or 2 or 3, I don't remember for sure ago, about the sending out of these certificates of compliance and what would the legal situation be if the state had sent out a certificate of compliance, but yet upon inspection, upon incident that the site is found to have something non-compliant that was directly attributable to the leak. And at that time, we talked about, maybe this should say conditional certificate of compliance or something. The other issue is, I know that we have members and some non-members that have contacted the department and talking about not having received their certificate of compliance, and that they indicated that, they're only sent out one time a year. They're really wondering what their position is as far as eligibility for reimbursement if something happened. So I think I think there's a potential real quagmire here if we don't nail down exactly what the criteria actually is going to be to either deny or accept the claim. I mean, we've had one case already where it was easy to see that following the law, in that case was clear cut, that it in that case was a denial. But you get into these gray, mucky areas. I think there is an issue with the certificate of compliance. It's basically a recognition of submittal of paper records, but it really isn't a certificate of compliance. That can only be done upon inspection. And lastly, with our North Dakota winters, there's no formal process or recognized procedure. And I'd like to give an example. So let's say in the fall, you have your spill buckets tested, and let's say they all fail. You need all new spill buckets at that site. And winter freezes in, contractors are busy. You talk to the office and say, I'm going to get this fixed in the spring. Is it okay? And they say yes. Well, in the meantime, they have a leak, not attributable to spill buckets. Where does that person stand? To the letter of the law, they're in non-compliance because they have non-passing spill buckets, and they could be denied. And that's kind of a two-edged sword. I guess I'm bringing the topic up because I think we might want to be a little more proactive on this subject and get further clarification from the UST people and make it clear how we're going to operate under different scenarios if a claim comes up. Sooner or later, a claim's going to come up, and there's going to be this quagmire.
Wayne, would you like me to talk on this?
Yeah, Leon would like to contribute.
Okay, so this is
Leon Vetter from the Underground Storage Tank Program.
Yep. So this, and I'll talk about it a little bit because I have a lot of the historical background. I've been working with the tank program since '93, and so the certification of compliance started before I even was started. So back in I don't know exactly when, but it was between 1988 and 1993. And in 1988, the tank program went into effect. And then back in those days, EPA didn't necessarily require us to do the inspections, the 3-year inspections like we do now. And so, and you got to remember also too, we had, I don't know what the exact amount of facilities, but it was a lot more facilities than we do now. And it was difficult for us. So we didn't have the inspection routine, the routine inspections. We didn't have we had a lot more facilities with the same staff that we have today. So one way to find out whether these tanks were compliant with the 1988 rules, I gave everybody 10 years to upgrade, had to do leak detection and some other stuff, was to send out an annual mailing. And I think that probably came out as a result also of just trying to figure out who had underground storage tanks. There was a notification process back in those early days. We had to figure out who exactly even had underground tanks. So we were writing letters to the public and saying, if you have underground tanks, let us notify us. Then we, at some point, said, are these guys in compliance? Are they doing the leak detection that's required, the corrosion protection? And at that time, that was kind of the two big things, protection and corrosion protection. We required people to send in their documentation. And under our UST rules, we do have the authority to ask for documentation for it. And so then the tank owners have to provide the documentation with what we're requiring. And so this went on and it kind of got to be a routine thing, and it kind of morphed a little bit into the fact it was a way for us. We don't collect tank fees for our tank program. Other states do. But it is a way for us to keep contact with the tank owners, so we can get updates on, who's the contact person, maybe they shut down their business, just kind of a way, and then also send the documentation. So then in 2009, the next set of rules went into place requiring everything to be double walled and everything like that. And Carl Ness also became program manager, and Gary Barrett left. And then we started having a discussion. We've got to start, tank owners are starting to kind of view this as saying, well, if we give them saying, oh, you got us all the documents, and then we're completely, like, you guys are in compliance. And that really wasn't ever the intent, I don't believe, because I wasn't there when it first started, but it wasn't ever really the intent to say, you guys are all in compliance with the rules, we're okay with everything you do. It was more of, we're, with the documentations that were sent in, you completed that part of what we requested from you. However, I don't think the wording was written real well about what exactly the certification of compliance meant. So Carl and I discussed this with Carl, I said, I think we need to reword this because now it's, and especially like companies like Walmart's and Costco, the bigger ones, the national companies, we're looking at this as being, they were hanging, you know, we give a certificate back and saying, you know, like the state approves this facility. I said, wow, this really wasn't what it was meant to be. It was meant to be, we want to make sure you're doing leak detection and keeping up the rules, not necessarily you guys have passed all or like everything is good at your facility. And so then now again with the new 2018 rules, this is again something we've been discussing and how we're going to go about it because it gets more and more complicated. We've been even talking about even possibly, at least I've been talking about it, saying, well, maybe we shouldn't be, you know, this is getting, facilities are using this as a way of saying we're in compliance, like we did an inspection, like we went there and did an inspection. And that wasn't ever intended, but it's being perceived as that by some facilities, like you, Matt, might be perceiving it. But so really what it was meant to be is of the documentation you sent in, we're okay, like we're given the okay that you've done all the necessary testing that we've requested documentation for and nothing more. Now, then we started getting into the issue since this was the beginning of the year that we're requesting this of, okay, so let's say you didn't do the testing last year and it was required. And we sent out this mailing and now you bring somebody in and do the testing. Well, before the test, it was almost like we're certifying that we want the 2021, for example, almost like the tax year, we want the last year's documentation. And you don't have it, it wasn't tested. Well, you can't go back in time and test it and send it back to us. Now, all of a sudden, you're out of compliance. And even though you sent in the documentation, what's happening is like, well, if it's for the 2021 year, well, you weren't in compliance last year. You didn't send us the documentation that we requested for last year. And so we can't send you a certificate saying you sent us all the documentation that we requested because it wasn't completed. Now, maybe for 2022, the next year, then we'll be able to do that, but for this year. But then we started getting also into the problem, does this count as a compliance issue for Dwayne? And will it be denied insurance coverage in case of leak happens? And that part, that's Dwayne's, he makes that decision. I can only say whether they are in compliance or not. So now that's another issue we have is that, you know, are they compliant? So I would say just this, I don't think there's any facility in compliance. If I went to any facility, I know I could find something wrong with every facility. It's just the degree and, you know, of how much they're out of compliance. Some things are very minor. Some things are a lot bigger, like they just complete disregard for all the rules. We're not going to do it, or just didn't even really care to even start the process to get the test. So Dwayne is the one that has to decide whether or not a facility is in compliance enough for getting refunded in case or funded for a release. And he can talk to us about our feelings on that. And I've had, Dwayne and I have had many discussions regarding this. And he knows that I feel that every facility probably will be out of compliance. It's not always the fault of the owner. I mean, it's just sometimes things are these UST rules are complicated. And so Dwayne's got to take that into all the information and decide on that and ask our input. And so that's kind of our say of what the certification of compliance, what it means. And we're looking into what we can do to make it better, more understandable. And maybe we shouldn't even do that process and just go with inspections every 3 years, or maybe we'll just do them every 2 years, or more frequently. And I know they love our visits when they come to see them. And so that, we're just talking about those things, just what would be maybe a better method, more clear method, and we are discussing those.
Also, to add on top of that, this is Ruben Pancho with USD program. To add on top of that, when we came up with that, we used it as a tracking mechanism. It wasn't for compliant enforcement issue. We know that our inspection are 3 years interval. So if we rely on the inspection, then the 2 years will go without any check. So we use it as a checking for the other facilities that are not inspected within that time frame. So when it comes to whether the site will be accepted or not, and there's a case Matt already alluded to, we did not go with that COC per se. We went with the documentation, the timeline of documentation, when was the testing done, when was the testing supposed to be done. So it's a tracking mechanism basically. And if we let it go, then how are we going to track that? Somebody might wait until the year of inspection to do their testing. What good will that do? It will do us no good. So wording might be wrong because scientists are not lawyers. I'm not picking on you, Jim. But that's the way we look at the things. We thought that the word certification will fit it for the document. But if there's a good word to put in that place, I would highly welcome those suggestions. But the tracking itself has to be there.
This is Jim. I actually do have a suggestion. I wonder if just adding the word document, certificate of document compliance would help clarify the limited scope of the certificate. And then I do have another comment. It's okay with respect to Matt's point on the spill buckets. I think that is a valid concern because if you remember, when the board denied that Fargo case, the way we wrote our order, we have to be consistent with that with respect to future claims. And my recollection is that one of those issues that we said they were not compliant with, they made an argument that that was not causally related to the release. And I think the way we addressed that in the order, and I could be wrong, but my recollection is we said, no, we disagree with that. It is related to this release, but even if it weren't, even if it was not, it's a serious violation and would form the basis for denying the claim. And so I think that's a published order for purposes of consistency. I think we need to be consistent. So I think this is a valid concern. When we have a situation where they're otherwise in compliance, they have an issue that's not related, clearly not related to the particular leak, the example that Matt posed, and yet we still have to determine whether they should be approved or not.
This is the
I
way.
think, Jim, just a comment, Matt, here. There could have been a component that some of their non-compliance was not directly related to the leak, but I do remember that they had not conducted line leak tests at that site, and it was a line leak that caused so I felt and still do confident on what we did there, but we do have the potential on and I don't know how you define it, but a minor item of non-compliance not related to a leak, there could be an argument made.
Right.
This is the way I've got up on the Teams shared screen, the Centric code that relates to this provision. It's 23.1-12-18, and it's 1A, and talks about eligibility for reimbursement. And A states that at the time the release was discovered, the owner or operator of the tank were in compliance with state and federal rules and rules applicable to the tank, including rules relating to financial responsibility, rules relating to infrastructure compatibility and all rules relating to health and safety, which were in effect at the time of the release. So, I mean, it's in black and white. So the only thing that can be, I guess, maybe a question is, what is compliance with state and federal rules and rules applicable to the tank? I mean, if the spill, if they were out of compliance, but the compliance issue wasn't related to the release, is there anything in this document that states that we would be able to honor the claim? It's a legal question.
Right, and I think my recollection is, I could be wrong, I think the board addressed it both ways
Yeah,
in that order. We said, no, we reject your argument that this is not causally related for the reasons Matt alluded to. But then I think we also said, well, even if it were, the statute requires you to be in compliance and
Right.
there's no exception.
right.
So it is a valid concern.
And, you know, I mean, the century code has to be addressed at the legislative level. And I don't know if we want to open that can of worms or not.
Well, this is Dave. Glad, you know, I know in our other programs, we have minor violations and major violations. Minor violations are the type of things, more kind of paper stuff that, and I'm not getting into the, you know, tank inventory sheets, but some minor paper violations that really doesn't impact public health and safety, but you violated the rules. And the minor ones, the major ones are, if you don't do this, this could result in something pretty nasty like a major release. And I'm wondering that, you know, I sure would hate to think that you, if you have a minor paper violation, that would disqualify you for coverage. And I don't know how we would address that, but we want to get the big stuff, the stuff that's going to cost us a lot of money as a fund versus the stuff that's minor. You should take care of this, but it's minor.
Yeah, and I think Dwayne's point is well taken. I think it may require going to the legislature to have that, you know, something like insubstantial compliance and a definition that explains what substantial means.
Right.
As being causally related to the leak, something like that, but
Or that would notify you, like keeping inventory sheets, if you didn't do those, if you had kept those religiously, it would have pointed out that.
yeah,
You know, I mean, this is Dwayne again. One thing that I want to bring up is right now we don't have very much to go on with an AST leak. But if you don't have a spill prevention control and countermeasure plan, is that a paper compliance issue and it didn't relate to the leak, or, you know, I mean.
I feel that's major.
It is, but the century code is pretty plain in its estimate right now. It says if you're not in compliance, you're not going to get reimbursed. And I think,
Go ahead.
And I think that it really puts a lot of pressure on the administrator of the program to have to sit and make those decisions. I mean, if it's black and white, it's black and white.
This is Tony, sorry, Dave.
No, go ahead.
I appreciate the visits that both Leon, Ruben, and the staff bring out to us because it allows us to learn with them. I don't feel that it's, you know, we don't want to be failing, you know, on these tanks. And I'll give you a prime example. Since 2018, before that, we had a store that had one tank that had interstitial tank, and we had single wall tanks. Well, we were not aware of, you know, unfoundedly, that we were supposed to be checking that interstitial space on the one tank. And dumbfounded enough, you know, we are now going to do that. But, you know, and that's the things that they bring to the table when they come and do the visits, because, you know, if it wasn't for me or some of our staff members that are familiar with our sites, and you have new people coming on board all the time, they don't understand it. So I really want to thank them for that. But you go to the AST side with the SPCC plan. I appreciate the documentation of certification on the paperwork, because the SPC would fall into that category. And if you don't have that number one, you're not going to step number two for the ASTs. So that verbiage right there with the documentation added to the compliance, that's perfect.
I would add, so if anybody in the future would like to know what a minor or major violation is, we actually have them listed out. So EPA has gone through pretty much all of our rules and said, okay, if you violate this one, this is major, and then, and so it brings down.
That might be good.
Yeah. And then we also have within our program, so that's when it goes to a penalty phase and fines, right? And that's a matrix. So we also, through our inspections, have we used to be called significantly in compliance, but now it's called,
Fail or pass.
well,
Not applicable.
no, the TCRs.
Deficiency.
No, but what's the TCR mean?
Oh, TCR,
Total.
technical rate compliance.
Yeah, technical rate. So it used to be called, the SOC, significantly in compliance. So within those, we have, there are some things that are not major and some things that are less. So we do have the ability to kind of distinguish ones are major and minor. And then, like I said, EPA also has gone through and they have a very thorough list of what's major and what's minor. Although most of theirs are considered major, but there are some minor ones too, so.
So Tony again, so Leon, with that said, when you guys come out and do your visits, could you apply that method to what's major and what's minor? So the seriousness follows that to get those accomplishments done?
Yeah, so what we have, when we go through, we have for each, so EPA wants us to break down the inspection in certain, probably about 5 different aspects or so. And then we have, for each one, we answer a question, did this happen, yes, no? And for each one of those, depending on the response, it says in compliance, out of compliance, or just deficiency. And then that will come out and give you whether they're in compliance or not. And I don't know, what is our compliance rate right now? But now, new rules, it really dropped down because it required so much additional testing. And well, you know what kind of issues there are as a result of that. But so our compliance rate went way down because of those.
Leon, this is Dwayne.
Yep.
And aren't we having some difficulty because of the lack of contractors available?
Yes,
to do that work?
there is a lack of equipment out there to install in the
Trained
sites.
personnel.
And then there's just getting somebody out on site is, unless it's an emergency, it might be 2, 3, 4 months. Some people have said they've talked to some manufacturers or some people coming in last fall. They said they were coming in February and they're still not out there. And I said, well, you're gonna have to get somebody else. So now that comes down to us, like, what do we do about those things? And I don't know. I said, well, it's been almost a year. Maybe you got to find somebody else, So.
Not only lack, this is Ruben, not only lack of the contractors, there's a shortage of equipment supply too. So now it's hard to get a spill bucket. It's hard to get those flopper valve or ball float valve. So
that would be, Dwayne,
Another
you'd have to take that into consideration.
Yep.
Yeah, they're not gonna be, but we can't say they're in compliance if they need a flapper valve. I mean, how can we say? But they can say, well, we ordered one, we can't get it. So I don't know. That would be a determination.
It's really, this whole supply line and labor issue has really been a conundrum along with the new rules adoptions.
Well, I do think, this is Dave again, that the world isn't black and white. And so we need to provide some accommodation for that minor versus major. I do believe though, if you have once every 3 years, if you identified minor year 1 and then you come in year 3 and those minors are still there, then they may
That's
go into
major.
major. But to set up that policy and process, I do think there is some legwork that's done there. And it may, it's really easy to say comply with everything, and if you didn't with this little thing, hey, you're out, but I don't think that is quite what, I'm speaking on my behalf, not the board, that we want the fund to do. If you're trying to do the right thing and you screwed up someplace on a minor stuff, I don't think you should be penalized for that. So maybe we just need to take a look at what we could set up in the process that gives a little flexibility.
Yeah, I think the best way to do that is to seek a legislative amendment of the the phrase in compliance in 23.1-12-18, sub 1, sub A.
I believe, I
To
agree with
make it
that.
track with the what's considered a major and minor violation under AST.
I would, this is Dave again, but I would like to see kind of how that would look first before we go to legislature, you know, what our policy, how we would implement that with. And we would be looking at the next legislative session, which is not that far away.
This is Dwayne. So if we're gonna dive into this rule, I mean, this centric code, there's probably other provisions in there that we might want to take a look at. So I think the Petroleum Marketers Association has been pretty implemental all along the process of, you know, supporting changes to the centric code. So the centric code was actually changed in 2019. When it went to the fund, when the fund changed to the DEQ.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from board members. How do you see this going forward? Or do you think there needs to be some flexibility? Still accountability, but some flexibility.
I think, I really think there needs to be some flexibility, you know, if the spill bucket didn't, you know, make the spill. Of course, you know, we're gonna have to go back to the folks that make that determination and, you know, if things were on order and this and that is done, well, then, of course, you know, there can be some forgiveness. But if we have to do the right thing, the same thing, time in and time out again.
Right.
If those determinations are going to be made, we've got to make sure that we repeat what we've done in the past to get to the future, right?
Consistent.
Yep.
Consistent. We need consistency.
Yeah, this is Dwayne again, and it's really important that that language be written. I mean, it has to be really good to define, you know, what we can reimburse for and what we can't, so.
Well, and I do think, this is Dave, again, I want to hear from board members, but it may be, you know, you define it as best you can. And for 90% of the cases, it's pretty clear, but there'd be 10%, the board's going to have to get involved.
This is Dwayne. My concern is that we leave too much discretion to the administrator of the fund to make decisions that should be, you know, stipulated in the century code.
You can't put, I don't think you can put everything in the century code. Century code will give you the
Right.
authority or give you a little flexibility. You define it more in other
Yeah.
rules or whatever.
Yeah, but we don't want to have it the situation where the administrator of the fund can arbitrarily pick this guy.
No, I agree, and that's why I think,
And that, because that puts a lot of pressure on the administrator then in that case too.
well, that's where I would go with, like the idea of flexibility, but before we jump off any bridges, how would that look?
Right. Exactly.
I can talk to Maggie about that,
Okay.
and because she's more familiar with AST and major and minor violations than I am.
Yeah, in our other programs, there is, you know, some, not the death penalty for every
Right.
violation. It's, you know, we
Yeah.
have some flexibility
Yeah.
in how we do that.
Yeah, because really the only regulatory authority the fund has in this case is whether to reimburse or not to reimburse. There's no fines or anything set up, so.
And the way we run it now is that if there's a violation, we'll say, we think you violated this portions of these chapters. What say you? And you can respond back, say, yep, I notified it, I documented this date, things are in order. You know, but that it takes a lot more involvement.
Right. Anything else to add, Matt? Must be on mute again.
No, just a real good discussion. I think there's consensus that something to look at and something that we could move forward reasonably.
Certainly.
Wayne and the board, maybe what we can do is take a look at kind of what the major minor violations, what they have, kind of come up with some kind of a straw, very rudimentary to get some intellectual juices going here. Jim can talk to Maggie, and by our next meeting, we can see if this is something we want to proceed to the next legislative session. That makes sense?
Yep, does.
It's very easy to volunteer other people to do.
Yeah.
That's your job.
Ruben here. So I just want to ask Matt, is that suggestion for certificate of document okay? Or do any member of the board have any other suggestion other than what Jim suggested?
Yeah, I guess I just, some qualifier in there was just my thought originally, and to now that, because it is, I think the annual sending in of the paperwork to make sure people are doing this is good, but it's a certification of submittal of compliance documentation.
I like that.
Okay.
I want to have, it's got the, manage a station and stuff. So I've done a lot of training of managers and stuff. And I actually like coming out to the facilities. So if you guys have any facilities, you want us to come out and train them on what to do out there, give us a call. I did that quite a few times, and I like it because then it makes my job easier in the future, hopefully come compliance, and I'll be going out to the farmers unions in Western North Dakota in July, Hazen. Yeah, and talking to those guys too about that kind of stuff, so.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on that topic, or can we move forward? We have one item, last item on the agenda, and that is, we should have a discussion. Matt had commented at one time that we should perhaps have a chairperson of the board, and that person would be then responsible for like running the tank board meetings. I would retain the responsibility to supply an agenda as presented by the board, advisory board members. But the meeting itself would be then run by the board chairperson. So have at her. Let's discuss. One question I have, this is Dwayne, have we ever had a chairperson for this board in the past, under the past administration?
This is Tony. I don't believe we have. I think I think where Matt is coming from, I don't want to talk for Matt, but I believe where he was coming from is because it gives maybe a better determination or a view of taking some of that responsibility off your plate, Dwayne, and maybe it should be a board member that not necessarily understands more of it, but kind of to speed the process quicker as far as, what we should be discussing and, what needs discussing and what doesn't, because we're more in tune with everything when we see it. And, I just think it's more previous to Leon and Ruben to, give that information to us quicker. And I'd be curious to see what Matt says.
I guess this is Matt. I just brought it up because every other board or committee or whatever that I've been on, there's a chairman to maintain order and make sure that we're following the rules of order at a minimal basis anyway, and that has the authority to keep the meeting under control.
This is Dwayne. I think it's a really good suggestion. I'm like Matt. I serve on other boards on a voluntary basis, and there's always a chairperson, and it's really nice as a board member to have the ability to go to the chairman, you know, with certain type things. Now, I know we have to be careful because we're a public entity and we can't discuss stuff off the cuff individually. But, you know, I think that during our meeting process, it would be really nice to have somebody from the board lead that meeting, lead the discussion. I'm not sure. I mean, did Jeff lead everything before under your old tank advisory
This
meetings?
is Tony. He did, but I think there was times where it probably shouldn't have been. It probably should have been a board member to lead that discussion, just for comfortability of everybody in the room.
Tony, this is Dwayne. I really agree with that. I mean, that you will not see any resistance from me at all for a chairperson. I think we've talked about it maybe in the past too, a little bit. But I think it would be really nice if one of the 5 board members would take it upon themselves, say, yeah, I'll be that chairperson. And I'll certainly.
This is Paul.
Go ahead, Paul.
I was just gonna say, this is Paul. I haven't said much this afternoon. I'm a better listener than a talker, I guess. But I guess if, you know, not that I've been on boatloads of organizations like this either, but I guess the ones that I've been on, you know, I've always had a chair, you know, in charge kind of the meeting and so forth. So I guess I would say if Dwayne, if you're, you know, especially on board with this, you're okay with it and everybody else is, I guess I would be on board too. I certainly think it's a good idea. And you know, I don't know if, you know, if Matt brought this up initially or whatever, but, you know, it's not like Matt is looking for an extra, you know, something to do. But if we do decide to go ahead with this, I guess I would be in favor of nominating Matt to be the chairperson, or if we decide to go ahead with this, someone who is, very engaged, I guess, and does homework and such. So if we get to that, I would nominate Matt to take that position if he's interested.
Well, I certainly would. I would.
What's the pay, Paul?
Well, you know, maybe we'd have to set up, each of us would, if we ever do all have a meeting together in person, maybe that one of the persons at least bring donuts or something. I don't know.
We could just have a barbecue.
There you go. We don't want to break any laws though. You got to be careful.
Let's see. Well, I don't think we would break any laws, would we, if we had it at my house or Dave's house?
I would hope
Or
not.
No. But I
Don't
do-
discuss anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we can't
Don't
discuss
discuss
anything.
any
It'd have to
board.
be strictly a social outing. Matt, am I hearing that you might be willing to accept that?
I'd do it.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor.
Is there anybody else that's in?
Is there anybody else? Well, we have a second round of nominations. Anybody want to be nominated from the floor?
It's always a good sign when one person.
Boy, it's pretty quiet. So I would need a second.
I'll second that. Brandon.
So Brandon, Tony's motion.
It was Paul's motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul's motion. So I think we can call for a vote, can't we? We'll just call for a voice vote. Favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
This is Matt, abstain.
Okay, well, it looks like you get to adjourn the meeting. Because we're done now.
Anyone like a motion for adjournment?
I'll motion for adjournment.
Second,
Second.
Paul, second, all.
Sure. Yep.
Yep. All right, very good. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks, Matt.
motion adjourned. Hey, adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice
Yep, thank
Fourth.
you.
I'm gonna quit the recording right now and dismiss the meeting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good Fourth.
Very good, guys. Good meeting.
That's good too, because his status as chairman makes it easier for me to fight if they want to have him deposed.
Right, right, right.
Increases his status as a type
That's
of
good.
state officials who
That's
shouldn't
right.
be subject to those kind of subpoenas, so.
Well, that was a good meeting. I
Yeah, it was
tried to be as prepared as possible.
very informative.
I like the idea of the minor major, because that, you struggle with that every time.
Well, it helps the country, it helps the owners understand how bad of a, what are we dealing with here?
You gonna coach me through the century code process then?
Sure. Hey,
Maggie and I will try to come up with something for you guys' consideration.
what you,
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you. Tim.
yeah, I appreciate it. This is
We
always-
got out of here early too.
Very good. Okay, thanks, Tony.
Okay, you sure you don't need any reimbursement? Don't wanna come?
No, I'm good. I'm
All
good.
right.
I haven't had reimbursement for 22 years. I don't want to start now.
Thanks for coming down.
All right. Okay, we'll see you.
Bye-bye.
I'd shake your hand, but I'm fighting this cold
Okay.
or whatever. so.
The other participants are on that.
Don't forget your little book up there for the
I
camera.
gotta dismiss the meeting first. If they did.
Oh, so the thing I said might be on the record.
No, it's not recorded anymore.
Oh, okay.
I just gotta find
About
the.
Matt's status as the chairperson.
No, I don't think that was on.
Good. Yeah, that was a good meeting. Covered a lot of ground in less time than what was scheduled.
Yeah. Board meetings, I really do.
Yeah, it'll be better when you're not having to run it.
Well, that's true. That's definitely true. You know,
I gotta say, the first time I was in on this, I was like, why isn't there a chairperson? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't say anything, but
never was
It
that
was-
way. I've been pushing for that for a couple of meetings now.
yeah,
But Matt brought it up, so I figured I'll get it on the agenda. Because really, every board that I've
Yeah.
ever served on is a chairperson.
yeah,
You know, nobody ever wants to
Very
be that
unusual.
chairperson, but,
unusual.
yeah. So you playing any golf?
Yeah, I got, last Saturday. I've been getting out mostly twice a week, Saturday morning and Sunday, sometimes only Saturday.
Has Arlen contacted you at all to play golf?
No, I actually,
He's telling me he's gonna get a hold of you.
yeah, well, actually, I wanna, the other guys besides Arlen, I still bowl with.
Oh, yeah?
Kelly Johnson, if you know him, and
Yeah, I know who he
Ben
is.
Nortzman, and then, Chris Barros is,
Oh, yeah?
I'm the only one of those guys, and then Tim Breckel
Breckle.
is a golfer too, and I've still never golfed with Tim. So I've gotten out with Chris this year, 4 or 5 times. Still haven't golfed. I think I did golf with Ben once. Still haven't golfed with Kelly. And during bowling every year, we talk about, well, let's get together for golf, and then we never do it. And it's just because no one is the chairperson.
That's right.
So I've been meaning to send out a thing to them saying, gee, guys, it's already 4th of July and we
I
gotta
know.
go. And make
Nice.
something, make a tea time and just see if people show up.
I haven't done anything recreational since I won that tournament against my son. That's the only thing I've done. I've been doing yard work and fixing up stuff. I drive my car once in a while.
I had a lot of yard work. I must have had 36, those garbage cans, I don't know what site they're, like 32-gallon garbage cans.
Full of leaves.
No, not leaves,
Just-
all dead pine needles.
Oh,
Because last year, that it was so dry,
all the pine.
we have
needles.
all these big pine trees and they were just, and it was like, oh my God.
Did
And
they grow
normally I
back?
wouldn't care
Yeah,
because they just underneath, but it's been so windy that it's
Yeah.
been blowing them into the yard and then kills the lawn.
yeah.
So I was
Because
like,
they're
I
really
gotta-
acidic.
Yeah, and so I was like, I gotta get rid of these. And we have 13 pine trees, I think, and I must have I think it was like, it was about, some of them had like 5 of those buckets just under one tree, 5 full buckets of pine needles.
How many pine cones do you have?
Well, there were pine cones too, but it was
Yeah.
primarily needles.
Yeah.
So I just dumped, the pine cones, I just kept on. It took me over the course of 3 weekends to finish that project.
My neighbor had 3 old cottonwood trees. They're probably 50, 60 years old, about 70, 60, 70 feet tall.
Oh, yeah.
And she had a house fire and it damaged the trees.
Now
So the
they're
arborist
dying.
said, you gotta pull them down. No, they didn't die,
Oh,
but they were, branches were breaking off and stuff. She had one that broke off and fell through her roof. So she took them down. It cost her $12,000 to take them down. So we lost all of our shade trees on the east side of the house. But that's all right. Now they won't fall on my house.
we had a birch tree, and intuitively, I should have known this, because where do you find birch trees? In swamps in Minnesota? They
Yeah.
have a lot of moisture.
Right.
And last year's,
Just killed
it
it.
killed it, and so we had to cut it down, and same thing, some of the branches are starting to break off.
Yeah.
So I have it all cut down to a stump, and I was thinking, well, now we gotta get that stump out of there. But lo and behold, the roots, there's like little shoots of a new
They're coming out.
birch tree that's coming out, and so we're thinking, well, maybe we should just try to regrow the birch tree from,
Yeah. How big was the trunk?
there was like
Big.
3 sections and,
Oh, yeah.
like three
Yeah.
parts of it, and they were all about that big around.
Yeah, it's just like my box elder trees.
Yeah.
They're that way too. They grow.
So I think we probably have to prune and like pick the strongest one of the new
Yep.
start, and then let that grow.
Yep. Yeah.
Because I was gonna,
Birch trees are really nice trees.
I was gonna, take out that stump, and then people were telling me, well, it's gonna cost you at least $500 to have a stump grinder come in and get rid of that stump. And I was like, holy shit, so, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was a really nice birch tree. And
I
it's
know.
gone.
It's just a shame. You don't have any trees in North Dakota at all, and then you lose one of the best trees you have. That's
Yeah.
a deciduous tree, no less.
Yeah.
Well, you're busy, so I better let you get back to work, huh?
I was thinking about
Calling it a day.
replacing it. Oh, yeah, that too, but I was thinking about replacing it with weeping willow, because
Oh, yeah,
those,
one of those.
I don't know, I like a weeping willow.
We had 2 neighbors that had them.
Yeah,
They both cut them down
just because,
after 25.
they-
They're just
they're
awful
messy.
trees, yes.
yeah,
And then they hang down and there's leaves all over and they're kind of, they're really hard to prune and trim
yeah.
because they leap down. But I don't think you want one. Both of them took them out
I like them.
and they were big. They were,
Ileana likes them, so
well, they look nice.
they give a lot of shade,
Yeah.
which was the main reason for that.
They're just a
birch
lot of
tree where it
maintenance.
was located, so. We have 5 apple trees, and they
Oh,
are a
those
pain
are
in the
nice.
butt, because they're on a slope,
Yeah,
so the combination of the acid from the dead apples,
sure.
and then it being on a slope, the grass
They'll
dies,
grow there.
the adapted grass, so we
Yeah.
have a big bare area. And, yeah, and then, now we've lost some of our yard, which I don't mind, actually, I don't care, I'm not a big yard guy.
Yeah.
The less maintenance, the better, so the fact that, but, when it comes to selling the house,
Yep.
we want it to look nice.
Did you hear what they implemented in Las Vegas? Starting in 2025, you can't have any grass or trees.
Just
On
have
your
to talk
property.
like all landscape stuff,
It has to be landscaped or false grass. Can you imagine how hot it's gonna be around there?
yeah,
Can you imagine if you put in synthetic turf? I mean, that's gonna be 110 degrees, because, that was a big selling point up here was synthetic baseball fields. Well, my son played on the one in Grand Forks. It was like, I don't know, it was a 95-degree day. It was 120 degrees on the field.
on the field, yeah,
It was that hot,
yeah,
just
I can believe it.
just radiating, because it's all polyester basically. Well, I'm glad this meeting is over. Now I just got to get through registration.
Yeah,
We collected
And then
it.
through late fee collection.
Well, we only collected $4,650 in late fees last year, so everybody pretty
Was
much
pretty
paid.
good, yeah.
We had 5 sites that we just, they wouldn't pay, so we found out that
Continued them.
3 of them had been abandoned, they had moved their tanks, tracked everybody down. 2 of them were underground storage tank people who wouldn't comply, and I just deleted them from the phone.
Yeah.
I mean, USD program can't get them to comply. We can't get them to comply. They're not compliant with any rules. So when they pull those tanks, guess what's gonna happen? They're gonna get stuck for the remediation. And nobody thinks about that until they try to sell that property. The bank says, oh, we want a phase 1. And then
Yeah.
that phase 1 finds out that there's an underground storage tank. Now it's a phase 2. It's $30,000.
Yeah, yeah.
Before you even pull the tanks, then you find contamination. After you pull the tank, it's another 50 grand.
Because they're not covered. So they gotta
Right.
pay
It's
it
all
out
out
of
of
their own
pocket. And the banks will underwrite it. We just went through a whole process in Dickinson. A downtown facility had been an underground, had been a gas station for years and years and years. And the bank made that guy, before he sold it to the new owner and before they got the tanks out, he had to post $100,000 bond. Even though he had tank insurance, they made him post $100,000, a surety bond of some kind to ensure that property would be cleaned up should there was some problems.
Yeah.
Even though he had tank insurance. It wasn't good. I talked to the bank said, well, we're still gonna make him get it. So it's coming
I
down.
wonder what that cost him.
What's that?
I wonder what the bond cost him.
I have no idea. Evidently not enough for him to not sell the property.